to the Real Recovery Show. Our episodes air every week, and I believe we're on episode 71, 72, something like that. It's been quite an interesting second season, lots of really great conversations, and today's episode is an interview with Marty Camerata, who I met him a long time ago, but I recently heard him tell his story, and as I was listening to him tell his story, the way he told his story, there wasn't a moment that my mind wandered. You know, like where some people just engage you. I felt very engaged, and so afterwards I prayed and I asked him, can I ask him? And I got a yes, and so I asked him, and I was really grateful. That was a really short bit of his story, so now I get to, just along with you, hear more today about his past, his childhood, the addiction, the recovery. And so I'm very thrilled to have him here. He has 21 years, clean and sober.
Nice.
Yeah, and so as we normally do, we're just going to get right into it. We're going to start off in the childhood with little Marty and find out what little Marty was all about. Yeah. That's so funny, little Marty. It makes me feel like we're talking about Back to the Future.
Yeah, right. We've got a lot of that over the years.
Yes, yeah. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a funny situation. I'm one of 5 children. I was born and raised in Newark, right outside Newark, New Jersey. So northern New Jersey, and my mom and dad divorced when I was young. My mom's still a superstar. She's 85.
Wow.
And spent some time with her today. She lives right down the street from me, so that's always beautiful. But we were raised in a Catholic Italian household in New Jersey, and we didn't have much. We didn't know we didn't have much, but we had a lot of fun. We grew up in a neighborhood where we played in the backyards and went to the parks, and everything was great, but there were issues, you know. We were poor again. We didn't know we were that poor, but we always ate, and my struggles, I always was a little different from my brothers and my sister. 3 brothers and 1 sister, and I was second youngest, and I don't know, I had a hard time telling the truth from a very young age, and that was something that I look back, and it started when I was maybe 5, 6, or 7 years old, and I think I can remember hearing in the background, he has a vivid imagination, or it must be the kids he's hanging around with, but it started getting more. And I was young. I was 8, 9 years old. 11 years old, my mother took me to see a counselor, and I was the only one of the children who went, and many years later I asked my mother what that was all about. Yeah. You know,
Did you find out?
Yeah, she said to me, your stories were getting bigger and bigger. Your lies were... She said, I knew you were young and storytelling was one thing, but you lied in detail. And she said, that's worried me. Like you talked about stuff like it was real.
Right.
And it wasn't.
Wow.
And
so she took you to therapy. Did that change
anything? Yeah, she took me to I didn't remember it as therapy. Okay. I remember it as going to see this guy.
Okay.
And it
somebody to talk to.
Yeah, and the guy's name was Jerome. I can remember sitting in front of him, and it was real, like casual. He was. What I remember was he did a nice job, like looking back now. I didn't know that back then. But he was really kind, and, you know, it wasn't like he asked me casual questions, and it just flowed. But I remember, even to this day, I remember that I didn't tell him the truth. And he asked me certain questions, and I didn't know why at the time. I just didn't tell him the truth. And nothing bad happened in my
childhood. Did you know, though, that that's why you were talking to the guy?
No, I didn't.
But you were aware that you weren't telling the truth.
Oh, I knew I wasn't telling the truth, and I had started stealing. So I had this combination. I had gotten in trouble. How the whole thing came about was my oldest brother Joseph, and it's funny that he comes up today because I got a Facebook message from a friend of my oldest brother, this woman Harriet. She reached out. All of a sudden my phone dinged. I was sitting in the chair the other day. Are you Joseph's brother?
Wow.
Oh wow! I know my brother Joseph passed away at 30. So we're talking. Joseph's gone 35 years. Okay, so I have never heard from this Harriet, and I knew who she was because she was the smartest. She was known as like the smartest person ever to come out of our town.
Okay.
She went to Cornell and she became a doctor.
Okay.
And all of a sudden I get this text message. So. Joseph had a couple of dollars in the dresser, and I took it. And it brought up a big thing in the house. Where did the money go? Who took the money? And I blamed my brother John. And I tell you, many, many years later, sober, many years after making amends to my brother John, he said to me, "Oh, that always bothered me."
Oh.
That they thought it could have been me.
Yeah.
And that, what happened
Did he get in a lot of trouble?
No, what happened was they took me and my brother John. My father was in the pizza business. And they took us up to his pizzeria and they put my brother John in the kitchen and me up in the front.
Okay.
And they said, "No one's moving until we find out what happened here."
Okay.
And they kept asking me, "Did you take the money?" They knew I took the money. And no, it wasn't me. I'm not saying it was John, but it wasn't me. It wasn't me. And my brother was just, and it turned out that later on he was upset because, first of all, they didn't believe him. And second of all, that they put him in the kitchen and me up in the front.
Yeah.
So whatever it was. But that came up like 10 years ago, like Thanksgiving. A lot of times things come up in my household on Thanksgiving. So, stealing, not telling the truth.
Yeah, would you say that that stealing, or more so not telling the truth, living, having these big stories was a way of checking out as a kid?
I don't know if it was...
Or looking for attention?
It was probably more like trying to check in.
Okay. Or maybe just to like hide behind something, or...
Yeah, I think that was it, or just trying to, I think this underlining...
Need for attention, maybe?
Maybe.
Yeah.
If it's the attention or the selfishness, that deep-rooted selfishness that you find out later on, that's part of the core issue or the root of the issue. Like, I had no idea.
So you don't feel like you were lying to get out of things as much as you were lying just to make up stories, but you did it too.
I think I did both.
Yeah.
You lie to continue to lie.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to...
Right, your lies need lies to protect the lies.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is fear-based after a certain period of time.
Or also losing touch with reality too.
No doubt. No doubt.
So did you feel later on, and I don't mean to like skip all the way to recovery for a second, but did you feel, and they say that, that the one most important thing in recovery is to be honest, to be rigorously honest, and that sometimes people who may have mental illness even can recover if they can be honest. And so if somebody is like a chronic liar, it would be maybe even more. Yes. But I believe we all lie to ourselves. I mean, how else do we sustain addiction?
I think that we lie to protect ourselves in a lot of areas. I think it's a human protection.
Yeah.
I think it comes about with addiction and less than and the immaturity. Lie to because I don't want you to know that who I am and that I'm afraid that you're going to think of me a certain way, so I'll continue to lie. But I agree with you. There's just so much to that you find out later on that you don't know when you're a kid that you're doing that, and my mother didn't know that.
Right.
My mother and the people around me, they didn't know how to help me.
Yeah. But they just had a feeling that it wasn't good.
Yeah, and it wasn't, because there was trouble from a young age, not just from stealing, but my emotional nature was always. I had gone and been evaluated for mental illness, not so much when I was young, because it was really, really uncommon back in the 70s.
Yeah.
I mean, I think mental illness has been on the rise over the last...
Or the recognition of it.
The recognition of it, because I don't think...
believe we had a lot of mental illness back then.
Sure.
Because I'm a product of the 70s and the 80s
Sure.
myself, so... But I believe that it was definitely something that was not talked about. In fact, we didn't have really that self-help movement until the latter part of the 70s and the 80s. So people weren't really...
Yeah, no doubt.
Nobody had the knowledge or the awareness of what to do.
If you think about the amount of people who are helping others today in that field, and the amount of resources that are being put out for that.
Amazing.
It's amazing.
But that wasn't there.
Definitely not. I mean...
The things that happened in our childhood also, like I had child abuse, a lot of it wouldn't have been able to happen with the checks and the things that are happening now and the public awareness.
Yeah, I was very fortunate.
Not saying that kids don't get abused right now. But,
of course, it's unfortunate, but I think there's a better chance of catching it now than there was before.
Yeah.
I grew up in a loving, kind... If I could spend an hour telling my mother's story.
Just kidding.
My mother's story is just amazing. Graduates high school at 16 years old, starts college. She's a superstar as far as her ability to learn. She's a sophomore in college. She's doing great. She's, a perfect student, and she meets my father. Boy meets girl on campus, and all of a sudden my mother's eloping and having my brother Joseph.
And when did they split?
They split in...
How old were you?
I was 5.
So maybe there's a correlation between the uptick of lying and then subsequent stealing and the fact that there wasn't a steady father figure around.
Well, I think that's a really big... I mean, I had the privilege of going to share in the prison systems and so on, and across the board, a father not being available is a huge setback for every young man. And especially for every, I've been taught by mentors and men who, I try to center myself around men in the last 20 years that their job is to act a certain way, live a certain way. And, the importance of a man in a woman's relationship. That when God puts women in your life, He trusts you to take care of them. That's the line I was told early in my recovery. And He was like, do you know what a responsibility that is? And I know that not being available for my daughter when she was younger has affected my daughter. My daughter's 32 years old. It has still affected her.
So when your parents got divorced, was your dad around at all? Or?
Yeah, my father lived 20 minutes from us. My father was alcoholic and a compulsive gambler.
So not the most emotionally available person.
Definitely not. And in doing some inventory as I got into recovery, I found out, because I had this conversation with my brother John, who has a totally different outlook and relation. If you ask my brother John about my father, it's a totally different story. Every child has
a whole different childhood.
Yeah.
You're like, did we grow up in the same house?
Right.
Okay.
Now, me and my sister are like, no, it wasn't like that.
Right.
You're totally insane, John. This did not happen. But my brother wanted a relationship with my father. And me and my sister, we really didn't. And I think what happened was I was involved sports-wise, and my father didn't show up. My father had an inability, which is really common with addiction and alcoholism, the inability to show up for life. And, when you're 12 years old and you're playing basketball and everybody else's father is in the stands and your father's not there, but my mother was there. My mother was there for every event. I don't think, I can't sit here even today and say, I remember how that felt, because I didn't. It was blank. It was blank. I remember my father did show up a couple of times, and I played terrible. I played terrible.
And you remember that.
And I do remember that. I was like, I couldn't.
Because you wanted his approval, right?
I think so. I mean,
what
again,
kid doesn't want their parents'
yes,
approval?
I think it's common that you would. My first, early on, somebody said to me, somebody I really trusted, he used to use it, that would be common. He would say things like, we would talk about certain situations about how I felt and so on, and he'd say, that's not so much alcoholism or drug addiction, that's common. That a young boy not having his father as saying, good job, we can do better, we're going to do great, and you have that relationship.
Yeah.
It would be common to feel those things.
Yeah.
And
I think it's one of the benefits of recovery is that without maybe making somebody into a father or a mother figure, we do end up having these elder influences that allow us to have the unconditional love, have the support, have the direction, have a sounding board. People who do want our highest good, as would a healthy parent.
Yeah,
People who show up, who are consistent, as would a healthy parent. And when we grow up with alcoholism and our parents are in addiction or anything is going on like that, whether there's divorce or not, we don't have the consistent, healthy, unconditional love. We have dysfunctional, chaotic,
right.
On again, off again. Alcoholism breeds neurotic children.
I agree.
And codependence, and then, you could say that alcohol, the fact that your father, did turn to alcohol and gambling shows that he also didn't even have it to teach, even if he was around. And so the fact that he was using alcohol and drugs alcohol and gambling to make himself feel better, there is a part of us, whether we consciously agree or not as kids, that say, I see, you have a solution to your problems, that's what you do. Even if we don't like it, even if we don't like what it looks like, for me, the seeds were planted of, okay, you have a feeling, and now you're doing that. Okay, you are isolating, and you're doing that. Okay, so when I have a feeling, my mind goes, well, these are one of the tools you've seen used. Why don't you do that?
Well,
and so I ended up in all the addictions.
Absolutely. And when there's a lot of people, I'll use my brother as an example, he's being talked about a little bit today. My brother John works in the casino business. He works for the casino.
You have another brother, Joseph, that passed away.
Joseph passed away. I have a brother, Bruno, a brother, John, my sister, Anna Marie. Okay. And then I have a younger brother. My youngest brother is Bruno. Okay. And my brother John will have a difficult day at work. And I've said this a couple of times to other people. My brother John has his emotional nature is sensitive. And he has a tough day at work. He may leave work because he works at night. And he'll stop at Red Rock by our house. And he may play a little blackjack and have a couple of vodka and tonics. And he goes home.
Goes to sleep.
He goes to bed. The next day, he goes to work.
His car's still there. His wife's still there.
He's not finding,
right.
The bad spots of town. He's not losing his job.
Yeah.
He's not getting divorced. He's not, those things don't happen for him. My life was just so, my story is in and out of prison, so it was really, really hard to form healthy relationships. I'm a big believer that if you're around sick people, is a high risk of getting sick. That's why people don't like to go to the hospital, because everybody's sick in the hospital.
Yeah.
When you get to the hospital, the object is to get out.
Yeah.
Is to get out, because there's sick people in the
That's
hospital.
a very good point.
And it's when you go to like a jail, like a county jail, or you wind up in prison, you're surrounded by spiritually sick people. And to be able to get anything, now, don't get me wrong, you take addiction away from people and you put them in a building, you'll see the best that they can possibly be there, like in prison or in rehab, but they still don't have any tools.
Well, I mean, sometimes they do. Sometimes they have meetings now in prison.
Oh yeah, but
and they'll read and they'll start to do the work.
Yeah, very. There's more of it now than there was
Absolutely.
when I was locked up. I was locked up most of the 80s and 90s, and they were doing their best to shut down meetings, like, because it was too much work for them to move everybody and stuff like that.
And the risk, and the risking of the people coming from the outside, and then
and that was also the time where it wasn't about rehabilitation anymore in the prison system.
It was just about control.
It was control.
Containment.
Yes, let's try to keep these people from hurting the rest of the world.
So how old were you when you started turning to alcohol and drugs?
The first, my early part of my drinking, and I had a very short period of enjoyment. I was working in an Italian restaurant in the late 70s, and it was one of those things where everybody was buying everybody a drink. It was having a good time. I was a kid. I was having a blast working at that restaurant, and I met a man there who owned the restaurant, who gave me the first, you're doing a great job. I felt like I was getting some self-esteem and value, and I started, at that time you could drink at 18. And I was 17 or so, and I had a couple
of that too.
Yeah, I had a couple of drinks. Nothing big when I was 15 or 16, but when I was 17, I started drinking a little bit more, and to this day, I drink too fast and I drink too much. You know, even if it's water, or it's not water, it's usually not water, it's something, but I drink fast. And when you're drinking alcohol fast, you get drunk quickly. And I just always thought, well, I drink too much and I drink too fast. And the problem is I didn't know that I was alcoholic. And I started drinking, going to this club, and I started drinking vodka and tonics, and the next thing I know, I'm drinking 15 or 20 drinks in a particular night in a matter of a 2-hour span. And I don't know that I have created, this allergy has been created, and now all of a sudden I'm drinking.
I definitely feel like it's like an autoimmune disorder where it can be a genetically just sitting there and never being activated, but certain things can activate it. And so a person can have the predisposition genetically to be alcoholic.
I agree. I've heard that a lot.
Yeah. And not everybody who grows up in alcoholism gets that too, I feel, because this is just my own understanding, is that if you look at all the kids too in an alcoholic home, they don't all look alike, right? They all have different parts of the genes, you know. And so, like, I have hypoglycemia from my dad and my grandmother that my siblings don't have, right? And I also am pale, and everybody else can get tan, you know. So we have these different things, and so if there's a gene for this in my family coming through, I got it.
You got it.
Without even, just saying.
I agree. And I think that the adults looking at that time almost know. Like, I'm a grandfather now, and I can see, even in my grandchildren.
Well, that's also because you're aware.
Correct.
Where we didn't have that awareness
Absolutely
back then.
True.
I mean, I had some awareness about alcoholism because my mom got the books and told me that my dad was an alcoholic.
Because
don't be like him.
Right, because my father was alcoholic.
Yeah.
And because my father had some defects and some, compulsive gambling and so on, they saw things in me. And top it off, I was named after my father, which didn't help the matters none. You're just like your father. I remember hearing that. And again, I don't want to sit here, because I sat in places and talked with other men, and I didn't tell the truth. Like, I had heard other people say certain things, and I adopted it into my own story, only to find out later on that that really wasn't that true either. My first time that I really took an honest, or what I thought was an honest approach to looking into my life and looking into, what I was afraid of, who I was resentful at, all the things that come in recovery. If I pulled that out to you today, the majority of that stuff either is inflated, or it didn't happen at all.
I kind of feel that, so I really do feel that as we, especially if we have victim stories, that we can embellish it and add to it, and tell people and hold on to it, and then add to all the meaning that it has. So I feel like that's a big part of why we do the writing that we do and the inventories that we do, is to just get all that extraneous fluff off of there and stop the focus being on everybody else, and be able to go, okay, what's really true here? Because the last thing we wanted to look at was ourselves, really.
And sometimes whether it's God's idea to give it to you slowly because you're not ready to know the whole story,
they'll come in pieces.
Mine came in pieces. Like, I, in the amends process, found out so much more that I had done than I had ever really known that I had done. I made amends to my uncle, and I thought I had made amends to 10 other people prior to him. He letting me into his home was a big deal. Okay, so I'm sitting there. I wrote this whole thing out.
You think you got it all?
Oh, I think I got it down. I prayed on it multiple times.
This is going to be good.
Meditated on it. I'm going to go. I flew to New Jersey. This is going to be.
And then he informs you.
And then after, we're both crying.
Aww.
We're both sobbing, and he looks at me and he says, "You have no idea what you've done." And I went, "What do you mean I don't have any idea?" And as I'm saying that right now, I can feel inside of me that to this day, like, there are amends. Like, we flew into Newark this past summer. My wife and I went to Delaware for vacation. But I wanted to fly into New Jersey because I wanted to drive through where I grew up, and I wanted to go to the cemetery because my grandmother, my grandfather, and my brother are buried there. So I wanted that moment there. But every time I go to the cemetery, I remember not doing something for my grandmother. Like, when everybody was telling me, "Marty, you need to go see your grandmother. You need to see your grandmother." And I was so sick at that time, and I had done so many things wrong to my family, I couldn't go see my grandmother. And to this day, I mean, I have done everything I can in the last 20 years to right the ship, but even...
But you still feel it.
Yeah, and in a sense, it's good for me.
Yeah.
For some other people, I've had people come up to me, "Well, you need to let that go."
I don't know. I feel the way too. I feel like sometimes, not necessarily, holding on to deep levels of regret, but enough to keep, just to keep me in mind, just to keep the memory of it in my mind enough to keep steadying my ship. This is, I feel like it's important to not just remember the facts of the past. I think it's important to also remember, enough of how it felt so that it makes me more motivated to do better and better.
And I also think it allows me, you, and others to help other people.
And identify.
Yes, because if I were never to tell that story again, no one hears it.
Yeah.
And the men that I've been around says the story is important, not so much for you as much as, I remember being around this older gentleman who really, he was like my grandfather. I mean, he was my guy in recovery. Like, he encouraged me, but he also taught me, like, what was important here.
Yeah.
And he would say certain things. Like, I remember hearing over and over, I'm the most important person here now. And,
the new person.
And he'd be like,
don't let it go to your head.
By the way, you're not new. You've been coming around for a long time. You just don't do what we do here. You're not you haven't prayed. You haven't learned how to incorporate.
You haven't joined in on your own recovery.
Right. And like you were talking about when we first started, the honesty thing, I can remember when people would be talking about honesty together, and I would say, in the back of my head, it would say, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? And my first thought was, really, that's a lot. Because even 10 years into recovery, still immature, still selfish, underliningly selfish. I remember one time saying to my wife, and I remember her face when I said it. I said, I tell you the truth most of the time. And as it was coming out of my mouth, I wanted to catch it. Like, did you just, and she looked at me, she said, did you just say that out loud? She said, do you know that we don't tell the truth most of the time? We tell the truth. And I really, really believed at that moment that I was really giving her something. Like, you have no idea how much I'm giving you here, that I tell you the truth most of the time.
Yeah. And then I'm telling you the truth that I don't tell you the truth most of the time. Because I could have said I told you the truth all the time and it could have been a lie.
Of course. But again, the honesty factor comes in a lot of different areas of my life. It comes in at work. It comes in the supermarket. It comes in, I spoke about this recently with a guy, and I said, put yourself on point. Go through the self-checkout line and make sure that if you have 3 avocados in the bag, make sure you write 3.
Yeah.
Don't push 2.
Yeah.
If you have red peppers, which are more expensive than green peppers, don't accidentally push the green button.
Yeah. How do people get away with that anyway, though? They have like these cameras.
Oh, it's all over the place. I spoke to, I do a lot of food shopping because I enjoy it. And the women and men who work up in the front say theft is at an all-time high.
Oh, really?
At an all-time high, and they are directed not to do anything about it.
Wow.
Which is, she said, the bad part about it is, the bad part about that is it comes on to the consumer.
Yeah.
Everything has to go up in price because there's a lot of...
Well, that, and not to get off on a tangent, but being a retail shop owner, if they have things automated and they don't have to pay salaries as much because they have less people,
of course.
It actually, they do save money with that, but they lose it
on the other side. Yeah.
So, okay, so at this point we're going to take a quick break. Please remember that the opinions expressed here are strictly those are the ones that gave it and are not meant to replace your own intuition or professional medical advice, and do not represent any 12-step program. If I didn't say that part, I don't know why that just stumped me. But anyway, this has been a really great episode so far, so we'll see you in a little bit for the rest. Thank you.
Thanks.
The Meeting Space is a facility with over 100 weekly recovery meetings for addiction from alcohol, drugs, sex, food, gambling, codependency, and PTSD. When someone is scared to go to their first meeting, we walk them through the process, ask them and answer questions to assuage their concerns. Many are court-ordered to attend, and we provide free court papers and teach them the process. Our glass-enclosed, soundproof children's playroom enables parents to be in a meeting while watching their children. We have healing workshops, craft fairs, and special authors who come to teach and sit with our fellowships. During COVID, we were declared an essential business by the County Commissioner's Office. We were kept open so that we can continue our daily work with traumatized chronic relapsers and those who would have used alcohol or drugs in isolation. Local businesses rent our space as well to financially help with this mission, and they get to have a great location for their business meeting or training. The recovery store in the center of our facility provides literature, clothing, medallions, and custom gifts to encourage, aid in, and celebrate a person's recovery from alcohol, drugs, PTSD, or unhealthy behaviors. Both the recovery store and the meeting space are open every day, including holidays. Saving lives, educating the community, reducing social stigma, providing a safe place for people to heal. Our nonprofit is supported entirely by donations by people like you who want everyone to have a place to go to heal.
Welcome back to the Real Recovery Show. Before the break, we were talking about you drinking and what were we talking about?
I had gotten off a little bit, but the drinking.
Oh yeah, we were talking about stealing and stuff.
Yeah, and I tell you, it's a big part of my story.
About lying, about being honest. That's what we were talking about.
It's a big part of my story that started when I was. That's probably the core deep issue was dishonesty.
I mean, I really feel, honestly, I feel like it's true about everybody because everybody lives in some aspect of self-denial. And when we're going through addiction, we have to lie to ourselves about how bad it is. We have to lie to ourselves about our values. I mean, we're constantly believing things that are not true.
I think, in a sense, it's a human instinct for protection.
Yeah. But even the idea of what we're really afraid, what we really feel threatened by is also a lie to ourselves. We just don't realize it.
We don't realize it.
We think it's important that this person sees us a certain way for our own self-esteem. You know, we think it's important that that person approves of us, you know, or whatever. Or we are attached to material items and we feel like it's important that we do whatever we can, lie or steal to get these things. Yeah. You know, maybe we told ourselves a lie, like we can't have what we need, and so we do things to manipulate, you know, because of it. So,
I've heard men talk about from an early age. They said everything I did, every job I had, everything I wore, every car I drove was set for people to be impressed by me. I picked out something because I expected them to like it. And when I heard that, it's one of those things that sometimes you don't even know you're doing, and you find out later on. You know, I remember early on, like when the drinking wasn't a problem, and then all of a sudden the combination of alcohol and drugs became the only way that I could continue to drink. It was early 1980s, it was the cocaine boom, and the combination of cocaine. I remember the first time I ever touched it, and I knew that I could drink as much as I wanted, as long as I wanted to. We would go from clubs in New Jersey to the Fun House in New York and go to the rooftop from there, and 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, and for some people, like use my brother as an example again, he'd go to work the next day. Somehow I didn't like that job enough, I don't want to go to work anymore.
Right.
And my thing is that for me to continue to live that way, I had to steal more. And I didn't have a problem doing that because my character was of a person who like when they say you need to go to any lengths to in recovery, I would go to any lengths to continue to live the way I was living.
Yeah.
And even though my family was begging me, what are you doing? Why are you living there? Why would you do that? Why did you lose that job? Why didn't you go to work? And I always thought, as the years went by, that sooner or later it would end. Like that whole thing would end, and I'd start doing it like everybody else was doing it. But
like it was just a phase?
In a sense, I remember...
Like you figure out how to do it, right?
I remember praying at times to be more like my brothers and my sister. Like,
I mean, everybody, we all think, isn't that the one holdout, this idea that we could eventually drink like a normal person or do drugs like a normal person? You know, like whatever it is, and then we get to a place where we have to admit to our innermost self that, nope, that's not even a thing. There is no, for us to drink or to do drugs, we've crossed the line, and so I really truly believe that if I was to drink or do a drug today, I would wake up the part of me that
I agree.
lives a certain way other than I do now. And so I would, there's a really cool saying. It says, first the man takes a drink, then the drink takes a drink, and then the drink takes the man.
I agree.
You know, and so I really truly believe that if I drank or did drugs, that first I would be doing it, then it would be doing it, and then I would be somebody else again.
I agree.
I'd be somebody else, and that other Lisa doesn't really care about the things this Lisa cares about.
Right, and I don't think the people who don't think that way and have what I have and you have can possibly stay in recovery.
Right.
Because if you don't concede to your innermost self that you cannot, that you are completely powerless over it, that it will take you, like
to drink is to die.
There's
to
no
do drugs or to die.
Yeah.
You know, and if there's still a discussion, if there's still a reservation going
and it's
on
a
in the
funny
mind,
thing because I sit around with a lot of men who I really, really care about, and there was this one gentleman at a meeting that I was with at one time, and he said something, and he used the word subtle, and he was telling the story about how his disease is very, very subtle. It moves him. You don't even know it's moving.
Right under the radar.
Right.
Yeah.
It moves him so slowly away from being like this kind and considerate person to, someone who, he listens to his wife when his wife is talking to, he's not really listening to her. Like, and she'll say to him, my wife has said this to me, she'll say, when did you stop listening? Because the selfishness is so subtle, it slides him over a little bit at a time.
I love that.
And it's, and when he said the word subtle, I said, that's it.
Oh, I love that.
That's it. And I think for me, every once in a while when you're in recovery, it happens, hopefully it happens a lot early, because I think most people who are early need something that really gets them going. But you get some of these wow moments, and you hear something, and that's what I've been trying to figure out is the word that I've been looking for.
I love that nugget you just gave, because I am a very visual person, and so I can see, myself or somebody else that I care about in recovery slipping just a little bit, and it's just like, it's almost like I'm going to backstep a little bit. Maybe I'm not listening as well.
Right.
I can be in a group and people could be sharing, and maybe initially I want to hear, let me hear the message, and I'm listening for the message, and I'm like, woo, I'm all lit up, and then maybe, roll the tape, catch me months later or something, and I'm in that same setting, and I'm distracted, and I want to look at my phone, and maybe I get up a lot, maybe my mind wanders, I think about what I'm going to do later, and then next thing you know, maybe I'm not thinking I need to go as much.
Maybe I get
a little late and leave a little bit early, no big deal.
There's so much to that.
And there's just a subtle little slip that happens. of the things. Maybe I don't pray when I wake up. Maybe I don't check in before I go to bed.
Somebody
Maybe I'm not
recently
meditating.
said something that really caught my attention. He said, the further I get away from practicing principles, the less I ask God for help.
Absolutely.
And he said it in a sense like, when I don't feel close to God, it feels like it's like having someone you haven't talked to in a while. You have a tendency of it going longer and longer. I remember that with my grandmother when my mother would say,
I really should call my grandmother.
You need to call your grandmother.
Really should do it.
Call your
I'll do it
grandmother.
later.
You haven't called. And next thing you know, you got a week or 10 days and you feel funny about because you've gone 10 days and you know as soon as she answers the phone, she's going to say, where you been?
Right.
You haven't called me in
Right.
10 days. And it's so much better to get
Right.
off of that because there are so many people who don't show up for recovery. Life is difficult. I mean, I remember reading a book and it starts out, life is difficult. And if you don't know life is difficult, you expect it to be easy. And then when life gets difficult, it becomes really hard for you. And I always remember that life in recovery gives you a lot of different things. It gives you an opportunity to be employed. It gives you a family. It gives you relationships. It gives you responsibilities.
And tools.
And tools. So if you don't, for a guy like me, and again, I've seen some people that if I did what they did, I don't know if we'd be talking right now. If I did,
Right, I agree.
if I don't love and respect my wife in a way, we wouldn't be talking here. Because I can promise you, I know I have done enough soul searching, enough inventory, enough prayer that I know the things that will get me subtly.
That is so fascinating. I love that so much because I think of like when people go, well, how many groups do you go to a week, or how many how much time do you do this? How many times do you do that? And like, there's this sweet spot for me, I know, of how many times I do certain things. And if I don't do these things, this is what starts to happen with me. I start to get a little funny,
Right.
And not the ha-ha funny. I start to get where my skin just starts to flip a little bit and get a little inside out, where I start to hear things differently, and I start to think more about myself, and I start to come a little bit more from fear. I think I'm more in charge. I'm back to trying to manage my life.
That's that open-mindedness gone.
And all that's happened is these things that are part of my routine that I'm not sincerely doing. Even if I do them, but I'm not sincerely doing them, it's a step back.
I agree.
So
And that's a great
beautiful.
word. It's a great word. There's an area that I read, and it talks when I sincerely take a position.
Sincere.
It's a different. My mentor told me, he said, Marty, it's different when you take a position or you sincerely take a
Absolutely.
position. There's a difference. There's a reason why
There's
that
an
word is there.
investment.
Absolutely. There's
an
a trust.
investment.
Yeah.
There's energy given. There's
no doubt
being
about it.
present. There's
No doubt.
valuing it. It's like if I sincerely listen to someone, I'm really going to hear something.
Absolutely.
But if I just listen to them, I'll hear the words and I'll hear my
And
own
again,
interpretation, and I may not hear much else.
Again, I think a lot of that is underlining selfishness. I get caught up in myself or my little plans and designs, and I have this thought of what I'm going to do later, and I'm going to go eat, and then this is going to happen.
Right.
And in the meantime, you're sharing, and I'm thinking about making pasta later on.
Right.
And the next thing I know is like, okay, what time is it? It's almost time for me to get out of here. And
And then when I was listening to you share, I was engaged the whole time, and I don't know how much of it was because I was in the right headspace doing the right thing in that moment, or how much of it was you. I like to think it was both because you were engaging, you were very present when you were sharing, and I loved what you shared. But that's really what I want. I want to keep experiencing, me hearing what I need to hear because I'm coming with the right ears.
And I think we need that.
It's just sincerely.
Yeah.
And so the sincerity of being honest with ourselves, and the sincerity of also recognizing we don't have all the answers.
No,
and being willing to be taught.
And it's
hear new
super
things.
important for me, and I think for men as a whole, and for women, but for men.
That's okay. You can speak for men.
Yeah. For men,
they're the ones with
to
the real issues anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. If I don't center myself around men that practice principles, it's the same thing as it was before. If you're around people who are in recovery but still spiritually sick, you're going to get sick.
Yeah. And you can tell they're sick because they're very much focused on the things that they were focused on before recovery.
Absolutely. And it's, the same things it's the same conversation over and over again. And it's still fixing it the same way.
Yes.
I'm buying a new car.
Yes.
And, I was around a guy, he's got 3 Corvettes. I said, how many Corvettes do you need?
Are you fixed yet?
Like, how many Corvettes? Now,
I mean, hey, he could just like Corvettes.
Yes, it's good.
He could just
but
like
I have to
Corvettes.
watch for myself.
Yes.
And people say, well, I don't judge other people. And I do, but I don't judge with contempt. I know what I can do at this point in my life. I'm 61 years old. I've done enough inventory, and I've been honest with men for 20 years where I'm willing to listen to direction from them. Like, they'll tell me, you might need to do this. You're getting away from that. We keep coming to the same conversation about your job. What is it about you that you continue down the same road over and over again? What aren't you doing? And, so do I judge? Yeah, I judge. I know who I'm calling when I need help. I know, I
think it's discernment. Discernment says,
Sure.
Discernment doesn't have, I'm not judging the person's worth. I'm just judging their actions and whether or not it resonates with me that they would be a person that I would feel healthy interacting with like that. I feel like that's discernment.
That's true.
And,
that's a great word.
When I catch myself judging, it's because there's something going on with me, some story, something that I see outside of myself, or maybe I feel threatened that I'm not going to have what I need, or jealous, or whatever. And so it's always an alarm.
Yes.
I would never say that I never judge. I do at times, and but when I do, I feel icky, and it calls for me to because judgment to me, not to get off on this tangent, but this is a good one, I promise, is judgment to me has the same type of experience as resentment, because resentment is to re-feel the same thing over and over again, and a judgment is to re-project over and over again onto another person, because there's nothing to see here, nothing to look at. Right. I don't want to look at myself. I don't want to take I don't want to check my programming.
It is a good red flag.
Yeah.
One of those, okay, I have judgment over them. What is it about
one
me?
Finger pointing at you, three fingers.
What is it about me that I need to look at in this thing? But I can tell you something, sometimes it takes a while to look at the 3 fingers.
Absolutely.
It takes a long time. Sometimes I'd rather judge them for a little longer. And the discernment.
That's self-righteousness.
I don't know. I've been fortunate. I can remember when I got to recovery, I was so broken, and my story was so hopeless for me. I mean, there was nowhere to go. I was living in a sober living house. I had no money. I hadn't had a job in 10 years. I had no ID.
Because you were in prison? What were you in prison for?
Mostly it was theft. Okay. I was in and out of prison from 1983 to 1999. I spent about 12 and a half years total locked up. The last 7 from 94 till 2000 was the last run, and then I got released to a church. I had nowhere to go. My family had moved on. I was in St. Paul's shelter in Paterson, New Jersey, with nowhere to go. Mm-hmm. And my mother had my daughter out here. Mm-hmm. And my mother came in December of 2001, and everybody told her not to come and get me. My brothers, my sister, they said, you need to leave him. He's very, very sick. And she came and picked me up, and I disappeared just before we were about to get on the plane, and then I wind up getting to the airport. And I flew back, and my brother picked us up at the airport, and I remember the look on his face was, you're going to hurt Mom again, aren't you? And I was living in my mother's house in Summerlin with my daughter. I was in a little bed next to my daughter. And I remember going around to my first groups, and I was telling people I bought a house in Summerlin. I couldn't tell you I was 39 years old, and I had nothing. And I got a little job, and then I started drinking again after getting some money in my pocket. I had no tools. I had no God in my life. I had never, in all the years of being around it, I think my biggest problem is I never really believed I was alcoholic. I remember many times saying I was alcoholic, and then as soon as I said it, nah, I don't know. Alcoholic, maybe more of a drug addict, gambler.
That's how I was. I felt like I really needed to get a good definition of what alcoholic really was for me to understand how it fit me.
Yeah, I heard it early on.
Especially because my pictures of an alcoholic were
totally,
either people like my dad or somebody who's living under a bridge or something. And even though I had been in some ways worse than my dad, and I had been homeless for a little bit, I couldn't see alcohol being the reason.
Yeah, I didn't. If you had asked my family,
it's interesting because in recovery we do end up realizing that it wasn't the reason anyway. It was the thinking.
Right.
But I think on some level I always knew it was my thinking.
Yeah.
Like I always knew.
Ian, if you had asked my family, is Marty an alcoholic? They probably would have told you no. Marty's more of a thief, gambler.
But if they were to say, is there something wrong with Marty?
100%. I remember.
Yeah.
I remember people saying, "I'm not a bad person. I'm sick."
Right.
And I said that in front of my mother one time, and my mother said, "You're a bad person. You were really a bad person." And I was. I had these. There's a line that I read: dangerously antisocial. Yeah.
So your mother, she's 85?
85.
It must be so beautiful that she's seen you have 21 years.
It's a beautiful life. I mean,
recovery. Has she ever
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing the things that you've been able to change in front of her. I mean, how beautiful for all the hurt and everything that alcoholism causes for her to get to see the transformation. I mean, that's just
the story.
phenomenal.
My brother who picked me up at the airport picked us up that day. And told me.
John picked you up?
John picked it, And I remember being out in the streets, and my mother was rushed to the hospital because of heart palpitations. She was worrying so much about me. And I found out she was in the hospital. I went to Summerlin Hospital. My brother is in the lobby, and I walk in, and
he's like
filthy dirty.
Yeah. He's like, how about you don't?
And he says, "You're killing Mom." And I said to him, I can remember this like it was yesterday. He said, "You're killing Mom." And I said, "Yeah, I know." And he looked at me and he said, "You know, and you do it anyway." And it was that's the definition to me of powerless. Every time I think of powerless, I remember that moment in there, that no matter if it's my mother, I cannot not do it, because I don't have the power not to. And I remember shortly after that hearing somebody, when I honestly want to, I find I can't quit entirely, and once I start, I can't control the amount. And when I heard that, I said, that's it.
That's it.
That's
I
it.
just got the chills.
Yeah, that's it. It's one of those things that no matter, I would spend years away from it, locked up. I wasn't using in prison. And I would come home and everything, and people don't, and I didn't even know. I don't remember, even to this day, feeling like you're different when you come home from prison. You're not the same person anymore. People don't look at you the same way. The opportunities have changed. But mainly, you feel so different about yourself that you're not striving for anything. I remember people saying, you have so much potential. You have so much potential. And then I heard a guy one time say, if you're still looking for your potential when you're 40, you haven't done anything. And I was like, yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
Because people would say, God, you have so much to live for.
But
Why would you do it?
But you get also, like, spending time in prison or in psychiatric things or even on disability, you get, like, this kind of new narrative of, you know, this don't get your hopes up, you know, to be able to, like, leap too high because, you know, this is where you're at kind of a thing. And it's like almost like a lead blanket, this like psychic lead blanket over us that you have to keep, you know, inching it off of you and stepping up and doing the next right thing, and then you find, you know, that you can have a better life. And thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been an amazing hour with you, and
I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
it was really nice.
Thank you so much. I knew I would love this conversation, and I definitely did. And is there anything else maybe you want to say to anybody watching?
I just, you know, I have a life. I've heard this for years. I have a life that I couldn't even imagine. If I have 8 grandchildren. I got a 9th one on the way. And I have some things that have... I've been in meetings where I heard a guy who was... And this is the thing, and one of the things that changed my life was... And I think that's what has to happen. They talk about this psychic change. They talk about this, but something, the thinking has to change, and you have to go after these tools and learn. Like, everybody knows what a flat tire is, but if you don't have a jack, you're jacked. You can't change the tire if you can't get the car up. And I couldn't change because I didn't have tools. And I was sitting, and there was this Mexican gang guy who had been done most of his time in prison in California. He had the teardrop, and he was telling his story, and he said, I just asked God to make me softer. And I went, oh. It like took my breath away. Like, every time I even say that, because that's the goal. God, make me softer. Make me available. Keep me in a position where I want to learn so that I can be useful.
Beautiful.
And, you know, early on my prayer was, and still is, God, take me anywhere you want me to go. I promise I'll go. Just make it clear so I know what you want me to do. And when I do that...
Miracles.
Really.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
really
much.
Nice to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you next week.
Good stuff. Had a good time.
Me too.